Hi everyone, Tom here, and in this video I want to introduce you the Flammpanzer or the flame tank. I will talk about the German and the Allied variants as well. If you want more information, check the sources in the description, and if you like military history, please consider to subscribe to my channel. So the flame tank is a type of a tank equipped with a flamethrower, most commonly used to supplement combined arms attacks against fortifications or other obstacles. The type only reached significant use during the Second World War, when the United States, Soviet Union, Germany, Italy, Japan and the United Kingdom all produced flamethrower-equipped tanks. The number of production methods were used. The flamethrowers used were either modified versions of existing infantry flame weapons, such as used in the Flammpanzer II, or specifically designed like the ones used in the Flammpanzer III. They were mounted externally like in the Flammpanzer II, or they replaced existing machine gun mounts, or replace the tank's main armament like in the Flammpanzer III. Fuel for the flame weapon was either carried inside the tank in armored external storage, or in some cases in a special trailer behind the tank like at the Churchill Crocodile. In comparison, the main portable flamethrowers, the flame tanks carried much more fuel and could fire longer range bursts. Due to their ability to get in range of enemy positions in comparatively safety, they were invaluable for rooting out heavy infantry fortifications. The maximum range of a flamethrower was typically less than 150 meters. Because of this limitation, the flamethrower was virtually useless on an open battlefield. However, they proved a potent psychological weapon against fortified troops. In many instances, troops surrendered or fled upon seeing the flame tank fire ranging shots rather than risk being burned alive. Experience of combat use of flamethrower tanks was mixed. German flamethrower variants of Panzer II and Panzer III were both discontinued due to unsatisfactory performance and converted into assault guns or tank destroyers. The Panzer IV was never converted into a flame variant, despite having been configured for many other roles. The mixed results were in part due to development of infantry anti-tank weapons. At the start of the Second World War, most infantry units had weapons with some effectiveness against armored targets at ranges of 30 to 50 meters, like anti-tank rifles. Towards the end of the war, more powerful anti-tank weapons such as the bazooka, Panzerschreck and Piat were introduced, which were fatal to tanks at ranges longer than the tank's flamethrower could reach. In contrast to man-portable flamethrowers that were vulnerable to bullets and shrapnel, making them extremely dangerous to their operators, flame tanks were extremely difficult to catch on fire or explode unless hit with an armor-piercing round or explosive reaching the ammunition and engine fuel inside the tank's main hull. Tanks such as the Churchill Crocodile, which towed the flamethrower liquid container behind the actual tank, held no greater risk of fire than standard tanks. Although the towed canisters itself could be easily targeted, the tank and its crew remained well protected. Crews of flame tanks were not necessarily more vulnerable than those crews in the regular tanks, standard version of the tank, but the crews of the flame-throwing tanks were often treated difficultly should they be captured alive by the enemy troops. Due to the perceived inhumanity of the weapon itself, Captured crews of such tanks were often treated much less humanly than crews of regular tanks. Instances of flame tankers being executed by the opposite troops upon capture were not uncommon. Subsequently, British tank crews received 6 pence a day extra danger money due to the threat of execution. Flame tanks also suffered from the fact, along with flamethrower armed troops, that all enemy within range would usually open on them due to the fear of the weapon. And now let's discuss the different variants. First, I want to introduce you the Panzer II Flamm or the Panzer II Flame version. Based on the same suspension as the Model D and E versions, the Flamm, also known as Flamingo, used a new turret mounting and a single MG-34 machine gun and 2 remotely controlled flamethrowers mounted in a small turret at each front corner of the vehicle. The flamethrowers were supplied with 320 liters of fuel. Armor was 30 mm to the front and 14.5 mm to the side and rear. Although the turret was increased to 20 mm at the sides and rear. 155 Flamm vehicles were built from January 1940 through March 1942. The Flammpanzer II was developed in the Soviet Union but was not very successful due to its limited armor, and the survivors were soon withdrawn for conversion to Marder II tank destroyer in December 1941. The next version I want to introduce you is the Flammpanzer III. Approximately 100 of Model M were constructed by the Miak company in Braunschweig between January and February 1943. They were set aside for the conversion program. The planned production timetable in 1943 was 20 in January, 45 in February and 35 in March. After a month's delay, 65 vehicles were ready for inspection in February. This was followed by 34 more in March, and the last, the 100th vehicle, finished in April. During the production phase, the tanks were simply designated as Flammpanzerwagen, so flame tank. They were later designated as Panzerkampfwagen 3FL, and it was sometimes known simply as the Flammpanzer III, so the Flame Tank III. The Flammpanzer III saw action in both the Russian and Italian campaigns starting in 1943. Previously, Flammpanzers were attached to autonomous battalions, which were in turn attached to higher headquarters for combat assignments. This changed in 1943 with the arrival of this new Flammpanzer III. Platoons of these vehicles were incorporated into standard Panzerabteilung Stabskompanie, so Panzer Battalions HQ companies. These were officially known as Panzerflammzug or Flame Tank Platoons. This flamethrower was the 14 mm Flammenwerfer, so flamethrower. It was mounted in the turret of the Panzer III, replacing the standard 5 cm gun. In an effort to disguise the tank's role and to protect the flame gun, a false barrel was designed, which was 1.5 meters long with a diameter of 120 millimeters. The weapons were fired via foot pedals, right for the flame gun, left for the machine gun. Horizontal traverse and elevation were achieved via hand wheels in front of the commander. As a gunner and loader were unnecessary in a flame tank, the Flammpanzer III only had a crew of 3, as the commander now assumed the role of the flame gun operator. He did remain in the standard position at the rear of the turret, however. The other two crewmen were typical: a bow gunner radio operator at the front right and a driver at the front left. In the later stages of the war, the number of operational Flammpanzers dwindled. A number of the flame tanks were assigned to Panzer Flamm Company 351 in early January 1955 in preparation for action in Budapest, the capital of Hungary. This unit was still in action until April 1945. The next type of vehicle I want to introduce you is the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251/16, so the Flammpanzerwagen, or the flame tank vehicle. Fitted with two flame projectors and initially a rear-mounted flamethrower, detachable but still connected to the vehicle, to be operated by dismounted infantry. This was in addition to the standard forward machine gun mount. 6 Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 Flammpanzerwagens were authorized for issue to each Panzergrenadier regiment or in the Pioneer Battalion. Though vulnerable, they were used very successfully at night to quickly attack enemy infantry who had just captured German trenches, hitting the enemy before they could consolidate and bring up the heavy weapons that would make them much costlier to defeat later. And now let's discuss the Allied variants. First, I want to introduce you the Churchill Crocodile. The thrower had a range of up to 110 meters, although some sources quote 140 meters. Refueling took at least 90 minutes. The pressure required had to be primed on the trailer by the crew as close to use as feasible, because pressure could not be maintained for very long. Used by units of the 79th Armored Division in concert with other funnies, the Crocodile was an effective assault weapon whose threat could induce enemy troops to retreat or to surrender. The Crocodile was a specialized weapon limited by the short range of its flamethrower. On the other hand, it was used so successfully against bunkers that many surrendered after the first raging shots. Aspects of the mechanism were considered by the British to be so secret that disabled units, if they could not be recovered, were rapidly destroyed by any means, even airstrikes if necessary. British Crocodile tanks supported the US Army in Normandy, at the Battle for Brest, and during Operation Clipper, the Anglo-American assault on Geilenkirchen. From late 1950 until their withdrawal in 1951, Churchill Crocodiles served in Korea as part of C Squadron, 7th Royal Tank Regiment in 29th Brigade. And last but not least, let's talk about the American variants. First, I want to introduce you the M4 Crocodile. 4 M4 Sherman tanks converted by the British for the US 2nd Armored Division in Northwest Europe with the same armored fuel trailer as used on Churchill, but the fuel line went over the hull. Issued to 739th Tank Battalion, which was attached to the 29th Division for Operation Grenade in February 1945, where they cleared the old citadel in the town of Jülich. After the Rhine had been crossed, they were attached to the 2nd Armored Division, but saw little further use. And finally, let's talk about the M4A3R3 flamethrower, or the Zippo tank, used in the Pacific. As the main guns of the US tanks were largely unsuccessful in penetrating the thick bunkers created by the Japanese defenders on islands such as Tarawa or Iwo Jima, flame-throwing tanks were issued instead, while infantrymen provided the necessary security during their deployment. On Iwo Jima, the Marines learned that conventional firearms were relatively ineffective against the Japanese defenders and effectively used flamethrowers and grenades to flush out Japanese troops in the tunnel. One of the technological innovations of the battle, the 8 Sherman M4A3R3 medium tanks equipped with a flamethrower, which were called the Zippo tanks, proved very effective at clearing Japanese positions. The Shermans were difficult to disable, such that defenders were often compelled to assault them in the open, where they would face the full firepower of the Marine rifle and machine gun fire. Guys, thank you very much for your attention. Please consider to subscribe to my channel and see you in the next video.